female airline hijackers are a rarity, having only been documented a handful of times since the dawn of flight. Customarily, it is men who take control of an aircraft, and usually in a team to gain an upper hand over passengers and crew. So for a woman to do so, and alone, is always an extraordinary circumstance. One of the earliest attempts was fortunately thwarted. In late 1971, police received a tip that a passenger could have possibly smuggled explosives aboard an American Airlines flight in Detroit, Michigan. Moments from engines being engaged at the gate, authorities ordered that the plane be halted and everyone evacuated, and then searched. Sky marshals ostensibly alerted passengers that there was a mechanical problem, but the flyers quickly noticed people being patted down. This prompted a 39-year-old female psychologist to take off running from the rest of the crowd, rapidly climbing a stairway. 3 airport police officers pursued Barbara Plisko, she turning to them and hurling a bag full of explosives while screaming, "We'll all die." Out came a .25 caliber pistol in one hand and a stick of dynamite in the other. Plisko threatened to blow up the entire airport amid the screams of hundreds of panicked travelers who looked on nearby. But before any devices could be detonated or a shot be fired, the woman was wrestled to the ground and taken into custody. The contents of the bag, upon later inspection, were reportedly capable of blowing an entire airliner out of the sky. Days later in court, Plisko faced a federal charge of aircraft piracy, which had a minimum sentence of 20 years and a maximum of life in prison. Oddly enough, directly following her arraignment, the woman's father, a local criminal attorney, argued a case in the very same courtroom just minutes later. He was not in support of his daughter, refusing to post bond or even observe her plea to the judge. The woman, a member of the White Panther Party, cited her motivation of the failed hijacking being the freeing of 2 Black Panther prisoners in New York. The trial would be delayed for 3 years because of legal wrangling. Plisko's charges eventually reduced to resisting arrest and weapons violations because she was not aboard the craft at the time of arrest. She changed her plea to guilty and was hit with a 10-year prison term. Following time served, Miss Plisko continued a long life of activism, including becoming the chair for the Ann Arbor Committee for Bosnia. March 11, 1972. Olive 4'11" and 54 years old, a housewife from Rome was determined to protest her sister's confinement in a Rome mental institution by asking to be flown to Germany. The plane, bound originally for Milan, was asked to make an unexpected detour, emerging from the jetliner's bathroom with a 6mm pistol and a claim of explosives. She got her wish to land in Munich. The 36 others aboard the flight were freed, including the crew. Of all people, it would be the pilot to leave, strap on a bulletproof vest, get armed with a gun, and return to the plane and convince the woman into surrendering. She would then celebrate her 55th birthday in front of a magistrate and would be charged with air piracy and illegal possession of arms. One of many incoherent statements included that she wanted to convince myself I was really in Munich, and that she had never been to Germany or had any ties to the country. Surprisingly, she would be deemed mentally competent to stand trial and not follow in her sister's footsteps of an institution. October 18th, 1973. 35-year-old Danielle Cravine of Paris, France, stated that she was headed for Cairo, Egypt to end the war. So while in the air of an Air France 727 bound for Nice, she pulled a .22 rifle from her carry-on and announced that the plane would be heading for Cairo. A quick-thinking pilot got the woman to agree to an unnecessary refueling at a Marseille airport. The 110 occupants were allowed to deplane, which gave authorities the chance to storm the jetliner and attempt to arrest the woman. Under the guise of being plainclothes ground personnel, police made a surprise rush of the plane, catching the woman off guard. Realizing who truly was now on the aircraft, the woman aimed her rifle at the charging men, they firing off several rounds in her direction. She was hit several times in the chest and head and was pronounced dead while en route to a hospital. May 12, 1983. A Capital Airlines plane leaving San Juan, Puerto Rico, was overtaken by a woman, possibly in her early 30s, using a 12-gauge flare gun. Her primary demand was to be taken to Cuba, citing a dissatisfaction with the United States. Though barefoot and wearing a turban, the woman spoke in a clear American accent and also offered a knowledge of Spanish. She placed the flare gun at the stomach of a flight attendant, demanding that she inform the pilot of their new course. This was the second flight in 10 days on the same airline to be commandeered to Cuba, though not by a woman in that case. This current flight made it safely to the island, where passengers had to wait nearly 4 hours to reboard and head for their initial destination, Miami, just in time for Friday the 13th. Because the woman was never taken into U.S. custody, her name, true age, and home residence was never learned. FAA officials feel the flare gun made it past the metal detectors due to it being comprised mostly of plastic. The 248 people on board were unhurt. 3 months later, the same Flight 236 would be hijacked for a third time, but the hijacker would be a male in that instance. 2 years later, in January of 1985, a Pan Am flight stopping over in Cleveland was preparing to board women with babies first. Half a football field away at a security checkpoint, 42-year-old Orannette Mays, who had set off a metal alarm, busted through airport personnel. Gun in hand, she reached the Pan Am gate and charged through the embarking passengers. A U.S. Air customer service agent attempted to block the woman's path, but ended up getting shot at by Mays, being hit once in the hip. The bullet was considered a graze. The woman later treated and released at Southwest General Hospital. Mays ran the length of the airline's jetway and boarded Flight 558. Raising her gun to attendants and shocked flyers, she demanded to be taken to Rio de Janeiro. As she began grabbing random people from their seats, a policeman tried to grab Mays and get at her gun, but she fired twice, the officer retreating from the plane. A passenger at the rear of the craft brazenly opened a back door where the jet's air stairs allowed 35 people to dart from the plane and onto the tarmac. Mays moved to the second-class section of the cabin and ordered the 7 remaining people on board to sit quietly. Over 3 hours would pass of off-and-on negotiations between Mays and SWAT members. While communicating with Mays via the plane's phone system, other SWAT members were given an identical 727 by Pan Am to do a practice run of how they may storm the craft. SWAT was becoming more concerned as the woman threatened to harm an 8-month-old infant and 2 elderly passengers. She finally released 3 hostages, still retaining the baby's mother, and 2 others. SWAT had devised a plan of distraction to gain an upper hand on Mays, planning to fake storm the plane from the rear, thereby distracting Mays so that the true team of officers could enter from the front and take her into custody. At close to 9 p.m., this plan was put into action. SWAT sent 2 members up the back stairs off the tarmac and created a commotion, while at the same time, a larger team quietly crept in through the front. As they pulled back the curtain to the second-class area, there was Mays, staring straight at them with her gun trained. The plan had backfired and she squeezed off a shot at a 38-year-old SWAT officer. The man was struck in the chest, but his vest caused the bullet to ricochet into his leg, he then firing his own gun and striking Mays in her chest. She was then grabbed and cuffed, the whole ordeal coming to a 6-hour end. None of the remaining hostages were injured, the would-be hijacker surviving her wound and later being convicted of various charges, including attempted murder. She never cited a reason for her desire to go to South America. A majority of these incidents took place over a 15-year period, from the early 70s until the mid-1980s. There wasn't another notable female skyjacker until 2008, when a 33-year-old Somalian woman broke into the cockpit of a commuter plane bound for Christchurch, New Zealand. The small jet had 19 seats, only 7 of which were being used. The craft was so small that the woman was actually seated only a few feet away from where the pilots were located. Her destination of request was Australia, the captain telling her there wasn't enough fuel for the small plane to travel that long a distance. This was met with a suggestion from the woman to send the plane into the water, which naturally was met with disagreement. The woman then decided to wrangle the controls from the captain, he trying to grab her knife away while the first officer stayed the plane's course. The captain ended up cut in the side, the woman still attempting to down the jet stream. This action caused a bit of turbulence, the woman being knocked away from the gears and to the ground. Two other women passengers tried to restrain her, but with knife still in hand, she managed to slash one of them. The assailant then proceeded to stand casually at the front of the cabin, alternating between calm and crying. The captain suffered serious stab wounds to the hand, while he and the co-pilot suppressed the woman once the flight touched down. The co-pilot was stabbed in the foot during the struggle. Surgery would be required for the captain to repair severe nerve and tendon damage to his hand. The woman was immediately taken into custody and later sentenced to 9 years in a New Zealand prison. Since this incident in 2008, the skies have remained quiet in regards to hijackers of the Fairer Sex.